Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Fulhamish podcast. It's your independent voice of Fulham FC, looking back at a gritty, grimy 2-1 win over Wigan Athletic in the FA Cup. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me on this podcast, looking back at our trip to the JJB, it is the JJB, Elizabeth Barnard. How you doing, Liz?
I'm doing well. I'm a little bit sleepy after a long journey yesterday, but feeling good.
Yeah, it was a long journey home. Those trains on the way back were very, very slow. Mr. Dan Cooke, star of the halftime show. How you doing, sir?
I'm still recovering, JC. I'm still recovering.
This is going to be my first question in a minute, but we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And Mr. Jack Kelly. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Always a pleasure, Jack. Always a pleasure. Jack, first off, how was the press box at Wigan? It didn't look great.
Well, I mean, for a ground that used to be in the Premier League, I had some high hopes, but then I quickly realised I was in Wigan, and maybe those high hopes should be put on hold. That they had, wooden desks and no monitors. I've been in worse press boxes, but I've also been in much better ones. So yeah, glad to be home, to be fair.
If you're at Wigan Warriors down the road, it would have been class. So there's that. We can always dream that, when the days you make it to rugby league, you're really going to smash it. Dan, what was going on at halftime? I have a video that I really, really enjoy. I've set some really nice music by A&Aldi that I'm going to share at some point of you just running into another bloke in a zorb. Please explain what happened and why it all went wrong.
I got a message from Farrell Monk on about Tuesday asking if I fancy doing zorbing at halftime at Wigan. And smart from Farrell, because I think he was teetering on 50-50 whether he wanted to go to the game or not. And once he realised that if he went, he'd have to zorb, he pulled out. And this was smart.
He kept telling us all he was at Laser Quest. That was a lie, wasn't it?
For his nephew's birthday.
His nephew's birthday. No chance. He just didn't want to zorb on the pitch at half time.
He didn't have the zorb in him. He doesn't have that zorb in him. And I said no. And then he replied and said, but it'll be fun. And so I said yes. And I had no warning as to what I was going to be doing. Went down at half time. Met one of the representatives from the Wigan supporters team. He said, did Diane explain to you what you would be doing today? I said, no. He said, great. You've got 3 minutes, 1v1 against this Wigan fan here. Say hello. And if anyone's zorbed before, 3 minutes is actually a painfully long amount of time to be in one of those things. And I shook his hand. I was like, hello, mate, how are you? He was good. Yeah, good. He was very relaxed. He seemed like he was equally as fearful about doing this as I was. Walk out onto the pitch, think, let's take this easy. I've done my ACL in the past. We don't want any repeat injuries.
To be fair, if you'd done your ACL on the pitch doing Zorb football, I think that might have been as in low-key, no disrespect, but I think it might have been the highlight.
I can't dispute it, but I thought, you know what, let's go in at 50% here. And I look up, and matey boy from Wigan is just charging head down straight at me, like fire in his eyes, and he just sends me flying. I've gone back 5-10 yards just on my arse, and he nudges me over and he rolls the ball into the back of the net. 1-0, barely even started. And then it's all a bit of a blur from there. I genuinely think I got my breath back about 20 minutes into the second half. It was horrific. But if anyone wants a good little laugh, head over onto my Instagram. I've got a story up of me through on goal as the guys laid prone on the turf, and I get ready to just shape to bury it, and the right foot goes, it slips, the left foot goes, and it just ends up with both of us rolling around on the floor, being helped up by multiple stewards as we're laid on our backs like upturned tortoises. It's one of the best and most humiliating 3 minutes of my life.
Dan, how would you respond to accusations that at 2-2 you parked the bus for the away point?
I would say that those accusations were entirely correct, and tactically I knew in myself that my legs had gone. The 10 years of Marlborough Golds really, really caught up with me in the last minute of that game. I was really feeling it. And so I decided, are any points away on the road bad points? I think not. You take a point away from home and you do what you need to do at home. And so as far as I'm concerned, I've done the job.
I tell you what, I wouldn't have taken a draw away at Wigan yesterday.
My personal highlight of the zorbing, and we are really going into this to avoid talking about the game, with like as soon as it starts, Dan Cooke is taken out. Like they face out, we're like, woo, go Dan. And then the Wigan guy runs, and then Dan sort of, for those watching on YouTube, bounce, boom.
It was so embarrassing. And I got a lovely message from Holly on Instagram. I thought I'd endured all of the embarrassment that there was to endure, and I got a DM on Instagram as a response to my story that said, "Didn't know it was you when Gentleman Jim gave commentary on your fall." So for anyone who was listening to
Jim to the Fulham commentary, that's even better.
Gentleman Jim was commentating.
You have the audio.
Amazing. That is amazing. I might put the audio of this at the end of the podcast, I'll be honest. It sounds like the kind of thing we should include.
I think everything that could possibly have gone wrong went wrong, and I'm very glad I did it. And I've got a pair of jeans that are ruined because, I mean, it's relevant to our podcast. That pitch was rough yesterday, and I felt the full effects of that in my Air Force Ones with no studs.
Yeah, I can imagine. I actually got accosted whilst trying to film you doing this by a lovely lady who was a Detroit Lions fan. And I'm very sorry we didn't actually catch each other's names. She was like, I really resent the fact that you compared Manchester City to the Detroit Lions. I was like, that's not what happened. That is not what happened on the Thursday Club. What I said is you can't become a Detroit Lions fan now. It's like supporting City in the middle of the three-peat because they've got good. And so I would like to, just say that those accusations are false. But alas, we are. We've done 7 minutes and we haven't talked a minute about Wigan. So, Elizabeth, I'm going to move it over to you and I'm going to move us over to some 3-word reviews.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, some fun ones today. A lot of good puns, or as always. I'll start off with Chris, who gave us Muniz's wigwam. Took me quite a few tries to try and say that. But yeah,
gone bleach for a Sunday morning.
Yeah, I did wake up about half an hour ago, so not feeling the freshest. We've got Jakob Krupa with Yes We Gan, which I love.
That is
Black, White and Fred. I think it's always good when you have to explain your puns. So he's given us just got pie, and then to clarify, he's put the word bye in brackets. And then finally from Instagram, Dingus Dangus, bendable, not breakable, which I liked a lot.
I was going to say, until you went with that one, I was like, it's going to be a tough task to name this podcast anyway. But we are where we are. Like, right, it was a tough day, I think is probably how I would put it, at Wigan. And Jack, I'd love to get your opinion on kind of the general aspect of yesterday, because at one point it looked like it was going to be really, really comfortable. And then fundamentally it just absolutely wasn't.
Yeah, the game went in the first half, particularly exactly how I thought it was going to go. Fulham with a lot of the ball, creating all the chances and just sort of trying to tally up their score, really. And like usual, Fulham had plenty of chances but failed to capitalise on most of them. Scored one very good goal through Sessegnon's cross and Rodrigo Muniz's header. Martial Godot went through and hit the side netting. Josh King had an opportunity as well. Diop header. I mean, there was loads of chances in that first half for Fulham to score more than one. And at half time, I thought, well, this is incredibly comfortable. If we just carry on doing what we do, we'll just see this through and we'll be through to the next round. But Wigan came out with a completely different attitude in the second half. I thought in the first half they offered nothing. They were pretty poor, and it was almost like a training session at times. But Wigan came out to their credit. I thought Fulham were a little bit sloppy at times, especially on the ball. I thought Harrison Reed didn't have a great game. And it's interesting, you make 10 changes to the team. most of these players have hardly played any football this season or haven't played enough football this season. So you're not going to be at your, glittering best, I guess. But there's a couple of sloppy performances in there, and it allowed Wigan a chance to get back in the game. They scored a very, very good goal. But I thought the most pleasing aspect of that was, well, this is now going to be, that one of us thinking this is going to be very difficult now. They're going to make this difficult for us. We're in a proper cup tie, but we sort of within 5 minutes, we're like, well, we're the Premier League team here. Ball over the top from Pereira. Muniz in 2-1. And yeah, I know they had their chances. I thought Benda was very questionable. I was speaking to Jim and Jamie after the game, and we were saying how, who'd you rather have as your backup keeper, Benda or Marek Rodak? And it's Rodak every day of the week. For me, I think that's something we need to look at in the summer. Obviously, I thought we were going to look at it in January. Wasn't the case, but yeah, it's obviously a good win. It's pleasing to be in round 5. I just think that the 3 times we played against opposition who have been lower than the Premier League this season, in Birmingham, in Preston, and in Wigan, I haven't been very impressed with the way that we've sort of handled the game. First half against Wigan aside, I thought we were good and a better team, but there have been moments in all 3 of those games where we've completely come unstuck, and obviously exited the Carabao Cup, but against Preston we were 2 up against Birmingham, but Birmingham were by far the better team in that game, and yesterday was too tricky for us, and we managed to get through. I'm pleased we're through, but I think from round 5 we need to start playing the big boys, and we're 2 games away from Wembley, so there's a real opportunity there.
Can I just counter that, JK? Just because I don't disagree. Fulham have been disappointing against lower league opposition, but if you look at the games that went on yesterday, Leyton Orient gave City a real good go. I've watched the highlights back of that. That was a tough game. Birmingham City took Newcastle nearly all the way. Brum probably deserved to get through that game. Like this is the FA. This is what happens in these cup competitions, and it isn't a symptom of what happens when you rotate a side. Newcastle rotated. They looked a little bit out of sorts. City brought in new players. It didn't quite work. They got ruffled. Their feathers were ruffled. But all it matters really is getting through it. And I don't think it matters for the rest of the FA Cup competition whether we won 2-1 yesterday or whether we won 6-0. We won, and it's fine. And we will change things if we get a better team in the next round. I'm certain that Marco will put out a stronger 11. But ultimately, I think the only way we can look at yesterday was that professional job, sort of well done in the end, if a little bit iffy at times.
I would slightly counter that than the other way. In the Leyton Orient are obviously a couple of points off the playoffs in League One, but they have a reason to have a go at City, especially considering their manager's a Man United fan, and kind of was really, really up for that game, right? You look at Birmingham, who are streets clear at the top of the table with 2 games in hand, and you're like, okay, fine, they can have a go. Wigan rotated. Wigan rotated their team yesterday, and we still struggled in terms of actually getting the job done. And I will accept that obviously there is an element of everyone's going to raise their game when a Premier League club comes to town. Fine. But considering how poor Wigan were in the first half, and I take Jack's point on this, I thought that we really, really didn't deliver on what we had to do. And it wasn't necessarily in terms of we didn't dominate the ball, because we definitely did. But at half time, I came in at 1-0 up thinking this should be 3 or 4. And I wouldn't have been surprised if kind of Wigan hadn't touched the ball between those goals.
Yeah, it's teller's odd time for us, really, when we're playing teams that on paper we should beat. And this is the case for Premier League teams we should beat, but this is also the case for Wigan.
Agreed.
We have a really dominant first half. We score maybe 1 or 0 goals, and everyone goes into halftime going, well, we're comfortable, but that should be 3. And then we come out in the second half, the game has changed. We don't look nearly as strong. Obviously, the Wigan goal, I'm sure we'll come on to it. It's not the best piece of goalkeeping I've ever seen. It's a beautiful strike, but that should not be going in the net. But when we got to that point, I was what? Why? Why are we going through this when we should have made it 3-0 at 45.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it was tough, right? Like, I think the ultimate like element of this was that at half time I went in and I was like, okay, we're only 1-0 up. We should probably be further ahead, but I assume that we're going to kill this off in the second half. And by the time I come back up the stairs, it was 1-1, and like that's potentially not ideal in terms of. I imagine that Marco Silva, Jack, picked a side yesterday to not only rotate the side, and obviously we can talk about Timmy Castagna in a minute, which is a whole different question. But he went out yesterday, and I think in an ideal world, he would not have brought on any of the big guns, in inverted commas, to actually give them a proper rest for a week. And instead, we had to resort to that to actually see out the game.
What Marco Silva explained after the game was that he was always going to bring on those players because most of the players who had started yesterday hadn't played in loads of minutes, therefore would tire quite easily. Therefore, we would need to rotate at some point just to sort of not like see the game out, but just to give those guys a rest because, you know, playing 90 minutes after not playing 90 minutes for a while can take its toll on players. And actually what we found out after the game as well from Emma Jones was that the plan was to bring on Willian as well if the game was safe, but the game wasn't safe. So we would have seen Willian if we were 2, 3, 4 goals up. I know a Wigan journalist said, "Oh, is that credit to Wigan, the way that you had to bring on these big guns to try and see out the game?" And he was like, "Not really. It was just down to trying to rotate because those who came off were getting quite tired." And you know, we're lucky in a sense because we, you know, sometimes FA Cup games come before midweek games, and you know, we're lucky that, you know, Liverpool are through to the Carabao Cup final. We don't have all these massive pile up of games now with Spurs being moved to mid-March. So, you know, I didn't mind bringing on those players yesterday because we have a whole week to prepare for Nottingham Forest. It's just a regular sort of Saturday to Saturday turnaround. So, you know, bringing on Smith Rowe for 15 minutes, bringing on Sander Berge for 15 minutes or however long it was, doesn't really bother me. Dan's right. We just needed to get the job done. My qualm with it was just how much control we had in the first half compared to the second half. Just annoyed me a lot because we were sort of in the ascendancy and we let them back in the game just for, again, a wonder strike. And you know, Marco Silva wasn't very happy with how we conceded with that goal within the build-up. We should have been much stronger on the ball before losing it and before they scored. So it's done. We're through. We'll see the draw later on. Hopefully we get a nice tie. We'll see. There's a lot of Premier League teams who have exited the competition. There'll be another Premier League team exits the competition tonight because Tottenham play Aston Villa. I mean, there really is an opportunity here. Someone asked, you know, Mark after the game, "Oh, your record in the FA Cup, you know, Fulham's record in the FA Cup isn't very good." And he was like, "Well, hold on. 2 years ago, we were 50 minutes away from a semi-final, and due to circumstances I don't want to talk about right now," which is what he literally said. You know, we are. You know, we didn't
circumstances
get through.
Could get me banned by the FA again.
Look, the FA Cup is a special competition. We're in it. We're still in the last 16. That's incredibly exciting. The season is still alive in League and Cup. So we'll see what happens in the draw, and we'll go from there.
To take on from that point, Liz, and I think it's quite an interesting argument. I was having this on the train home with the two fellows who were sat opposite me, and we were just discussing kind of the like job done aspect of all of it. And whilst it wasn't pretty and whilst it wasn't great, and I don't think anyone's going to sit there and tell you that Fulham were class yesterday, that there is an element of being like, okay, we haven't necessarily burned out anyone. We might have used a little bit more of the first team than, you know, Jack says differently, but like, I do think if Fulham are 4-0 up there, he probably doesn't bring as many of those players on as he necessarily did in order to actually see it out. But we are in the hat. And if Fulham get, you know, for example, Liverpool away in the next round, there's probably a justification of being like, okay, all we needed to do was get the job done and we got the job done, rather than needing to run rampant or roughshod over a Wigan side who, you know what, put up a really good fight in the second half in particular.
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally with you that if we had been 4-0 up, Marco would not have brought on as many players. Like, as much as he said he was going to, I understand him saying that because it saves the skin of his second string team. But like, I just don't believe it. Not to call him out, but I just don't think he's
not to call him out, but to call him out.
To call him out just a little bit. Love you, Marco. I think there is the job element in the cup is like always very present. We weren't good yesterday. If we play like we did yesterday against a Premier League team, we won't make it through. But equally, we won't make 10 changes in a 5th round tie against, say, Manchester United.
Brighton.
Although I think we could probably do without a 5th round tie against Manchester United, considering the unmentionable. I don't know. I feel like it was close to being really embarrassing, and like I'm kind of itching to talk about the goalkeeping situation, because we were very close to having to go to extra time and penalties, and I don't think we would all be sat here if we'd sat through extra time and penalties with feeling this kind of job done vibe. I think we'd be feeling a lot more scared and bad, basically.
Well, like I did have a conversation very briefly with a Wigan fan who was on the train from Wigan to Warrington on the train home. And he was like, "I was never offside in a million years," and I was like, "Maybe there was 4 players offside." Like, it's like so aggressively offside that it's almost Manchester United at this point. But I kind of don't mind that. And look, I was going to bring it on to the goalkeeping conversation, so I'm glad you brought that up, Liz. But I was going to take it to Dan for a sec, because I actually take a bit of umbrage with what Jack said earlier in terms of, is it a question between who would you rather have in goal, Steven Benda or Marit Rodak? I think the question is actually potentially, would you rather have in goal Steven Benda or a mannequin made of toilet paper? And like, I at this point, I'm genuinely leaning towards the mannequin made of toilet paper. I genuinely am struggling to understand what Steven Benda does that has made him a professional footballer at this point. And like, I appreciate that this is the morning after and I'm a bit frustrated, but like equally, I didn't see a single thing that he did yesterday that made me think that is a goalkeeper worthy of League 2 standard, never mind being Fulham's backup goalkeeper. Like, all I thought for the entire game was, imagine what we have to deal with if Bernd Leno gets injured.
This was exactly the thoughts I was having as well. I think I must have said it 3 or 4 times yesterday, every single time to my dad as well, so he was probably fed up with it by the end. But I was just like, what do we do if Bernd Leno can't play? Because it is terrifying.
And the one thing he probably going goal. like that. That's where I'm leaning towards.
I reckon Santa would do good. I reckon Sander would be good in there. He's got the frame for it. I think he could be good. But he did one good thing. He made one really good save. But the only reason it was a good save is because he waited so long to react to the ball that he made a very simple
really
save look really good. But if I was stood anywhere else, I'd have seen that save and gone, "Oh, okay, here we go. Like this is much better, Steven Benda. This is maybe what we saw in you when we brought you in as deputy." But from where I was stood, I watched the ball come through no bodies from the edge of the area, and Steven Benda just waited forever to dive for it. And he actually does make a really good save, but it's made hard by himself. And then beyond that, I mean,
one for the cameras.
We've had probably one for the cameras, but it wasn't even for the cameras. It was genuine. It was genuinely panic stations. But it's just he flapped for a cross in the first half, where like we saw the same thing against Preston, the same thing against Watford, where you're like, "Oh, I have no confidence with you when the ball's coming into the area," which, especially against lower league opposition, is how they're going to try and get joy the most of the time, is set pieces or crosses into the box, and he doesn't look comfortable at all. Then there's the goal. I see what you're saying, Liz. I still don't think he saves it, but I said on the quick take, he could at least make it look like he was trying to save it. He sort of scampers across his goal and then just falls over, as opposed to stretching full stretch and trying to get something on it. And then there was just there's obviously that abhorrent clearance where he kicks it straight into the Wigan player that Jorge Cuenca deserves an immense amount of credit for covering
I want to come
a huge amount of ground.
So actually, I thought Cuenca was excellent, but yes,
agreed. We've got a problem. Like we've got a real problem, and the fact that we've been able to rely on Bernd Leno for 3 seasons now with no issues, it's sort of like it feels like it's due at some point. It feels like there's a red card or an injury coming, and I think that does kill our season entirely if it happens, because it's not just the little things. There are just, to me, watching him as myself, a dreadful goalkeeper, I watch him do things that it's like shot stopping, saves that you should be easy, he makes look really difficult. And it's not just the distribution from the back or coming and claiming corners. I just can't pinpoint anything that he's particularly good at. And that's a big worry.
Yeah, I mean, Jack, like my mind is drawn. Do you remember it used to be like adverts on TV with like brands of kitchen towels? And like they were like having like two examples, and one of them would just break apart anytime there was the water in it. And that's every time I watch Steven Benda, that's all I think about.
The worrying thing for me about the goalkeeper situation is, I was speaking to Jim about this after the game, is that most teams in the Premier League have 3 senior keepers and we have just 2. And I don't really know why. According
we
to
have
our
one
squad,
and some paper mache.
Exactly. I mean, Alex Borto is under 21's keeper, and he's our third choice.
Bring him in.
To be fair, I've been very impressed when I've seen him this season. To be fair, when Benda first signed, I think he was injured for a while as well, and then he sort of, every time I've seen him play, I remember being in Portugal in pre-season. I think he played 45 minutes, and I was just like, this guy is not very good at goalkeeping. I think this is now 2 scenarios where we're a Leno injury away from disaster, we're a Castagna injury away from disaster. Fail to prepare, and you prepare to fail. I just don't see why we didn't address these issues in the markets. I know we tried with the right back. That's been well publicised, but the goalkeeper situation, and no one's really. I probably should be questioning Silva about this, but then again, he'll probably always back his player and say that Benda is a top professional, etc., etc. But I do worry. Like Dan said, we are if Leno gets injured or suspended, or I just don't know where we go from there, really. It's a huge worry, and it goes back to my point I just made. Like, most of these clubs, albeit it be Scott Carson, who's like 56 years old, have a third choice goalkeeper.
Bring him in.
And I have nothing more to say. If Leno gets injured, it's game over, really. Benda is not good enough to be a second choice goalkeeper in the Premier League for a team who are 1 point off Europe. Simple as that.
Liz, I'm itching to let you loose on this.
I feel like, thank God we've got 36 points, not to be dramatic, but
it's so fair.
If Bernd Leno had got injured in September, we would have been, absolutely screwed. And like, if Bernd Leno gets injured now and we pick up maybe 1 more point until the end of the season, then we'd be fine. But Dan's right. Like, if Leno gets injured, if Leno gets suspended, our season is done. Like, that's it. And I don't want to be harsh, but I'm just being honest about what I saw. And I feel like it's the first time that I've like truly locked into a Steven Benda performance. And honestly, I hope it's the last time. I've seen him before. I've watched the other games, but like, I don't know, just everything I was doing. I was sat next to a friend who doesn't follow Fulham, a Wigan local, not a Wigan fan. And she was like, is this guy like, is he like actually your backup? And I was like, yeah, like he is. She said he looked so unconfident. I was like, yeah. Nothing he's doing. The clearance where he passed it straight to a Wigan player, honestly, felt sick. I was also in quite a unique position where if it had gone to extra time and penalties, due to a cancelled train, I would have ended up, and I'd stayed, I would have ended up stranded in Wolverhampton Station. And like, let it be known.
No one wants that. Let's just be
No
clear.
one wants that. Yeah, my connecting train back home was cancelled. It was bad. And I was like, let it be known, the person, I always want Fulham to win, but when your fate for the night is in the hands of Steven Benda, that feels scary. That feels really, really scary. Like, Bernd Leno has to start in the 5th round. Even if we draw like Doncaster or whatever, he has to start.
Yeah.
Liz is so spot on here as well. You twigged a memory. One of the things that I said about 60 minutes into the game was I genuinely think if Bernd Leno is injured and can't play for the rest of the season, I don't think we'd win another Premier League game. But I genuinely think that might be true because Wigan worked out. I mean, they took their time, but they worked out after about 47 minutes that you can just shoot from anywhere and you've got a chance. And like, it's one thing having Johnny Smith, very, very good footballer, lovely left foot doing it. But suddenly when you're up against a Premier League team who have about 4 or 5 players who are incredibly serviceable from range, we'd be so done. We would be done.
It was really dark at times, actually. Like it was like that. I mean, it was almost like a tragic comedy unfolding in front of my eyes, and I didn't really know what to do about it. Like I was a bit like, "Can we just blow the whistle, please, so I can go home?" Like that was how I felt about a lot of the game, and most of that was to do with Steven Benda. But Dan, you brought it up earlier, and I did want to bring it on because there were some positives, and I thought one of them, Jack, was a very, very composed, well put together performance from Jorge Cuenca.
Jorge Cuenca is maybe the best centre back in the world. I mean, he's fantastic on the ball. You speak. I just spoke about having backup players to positions who aren't good enough. In Steven Benda, but if you need a backup left-sided centre back, Jorge Cuenca is your guy. Very composed. Every time I've seen him this season, he hasn't really put a foot wrong. Being put in at Anfield was a huge test, and he stood up to it fantastically alongside Diop. I do like that partnership quite a lot. Cuenca, ball playing centre back, really good at sort of keeping the possession, playing the ball forward, and I'm absolutely delighted to have him. It's just a shame that he's not, seen loads of minutes this season because we have, Joachim Andersen and Calvin Bassey. I have said a lot of times this season, this is the most comfortable I've felt with our centre-backs and all the options we have at centre-back in quite a long time. I think Issa Diop, albeit has made 1 or 2 mistakes this season, has come on leaps and bounds. He's playing the best football I've seen him play at Fulham this season. Cuenca's a fantastic backup to Calvin Bassey, and Bassey's been brilliant this season, albeit he's again made a couple of errors this season. But what a centre-back doesn't make errors? When you're getting pressed by Premier League teams every week, you're always going to be put under pressure and forced into making mistakes. Even the best of players make mistakes. Joachim Andersen hasn't quite been the player we saw since he got his injury, but hopefully he's coming back to his full potential because he's an excellent player and one of the best centre-backs, I think, outside the top 6 on his day. Jorge Cuenca, great pair of hands, safe pair of hands, and really pleased to have him. And hopefully we get to see more of him in the near future.
Yeah, Jack, I thought what Cuenca did well as Issa Diop, and I unfortunately for Issa, he did his thing where for 99.9% of the game, I thought he was pretty flawless, and he is half to blame for the clearance from Steven Benda that ricochets into Wigan's path, because it's a bizarre back pass from Issa. But the two of them were, and again, they weren't being pressed relentlessly, but I thought the way they controlled the tempo of the game was really nice. I thought Issa Diop picked up some lovely positions, sort of almost like an inverted right back, but from a centre-back's position. He drifted out into that sort of half space in the middle of the park, which opened up those passing lanes really nicely, which there was never any danger of that initial press from Wigan because Issa was picking up very smart positions. And the two of them were just very composed on the ball. Maybe they could have injected a bit of urgency in that first half when it was really, really one-sided. But if the idea was to go out and control that game from start to finish and win 3-0, I think they were going about it in the right way. It was a very composed performance from the two of them. And it is a shame with Cuenca. And I think Marco said it from the very beginning when he signed. He'll surprise a lot of people with how good he is. But there is no route for him into this team. There just isn't. I think the only way he gets into this team is probably a Calvin Bassey injury, or I was going to say maybe even an Anthony Robinson injury, God forbid. Because
Calvin left back, yeah.
Yeah, because I still don't know if Marco fully, and we'll probably come on to Sess, but I don't know if Marco would fully trust Sess to play at left back in the Premier League, and Calvin Bassey might be a smarter option. But otherwise, Cuenca is just going to have to be this squad player, and it's a shame because he's a very nice footballer to watch and in possession brilliant. But that last ditch tackle at 2-1 is what gets us out of this game, because it's a bad touch from the Wigan forward. I can't remember who it was who was bearing down on goal, but it was a poor touch. But Cuenca sensed that, and he does enough, and that's all he needed to do. He sensed the danger, he got back across, and yeah, really, really happy with that. And I think Issa Diop, every time he plays, still is just putting his name forward for like I'm good enough to start in this team. It's nice to see.
Every time I watch Cuenca, it's a bit like watching like a I don't want to say a poor man's Pau Torres, but that's quite how I feel about him. It's like watching kind of a younger Pau Torres who hasn't quite come into his own yet. And that's a high compliment. It's not meant to be a negative. I think he's a really, really lovely footballer. I mean, I thought there was only one person to come to with the Sess question. Liz, how did you feel he got on yesterday?
Yeah, I've got Sess on the back of the top that I'm wearing right now. So there definitely is only one person to come on to with this. I thought he was okay, there is a level of bias that I have towards Ryan Sessegnon that is probably a bit questionable.
We'll take what you say with a pinch of salt. It's right.
Yeah, but I thought he was great yesterday, and I loved his assist for the Muniz goal. So good, such a good cross. And we've had a couple of questions in about people being like, should he be starting in the Premier League? It hurts me to say. It hurts me to say that I wouldn't actually go that far, but I think potentially I would like to see him forward in front of Robinson a bit more. So bringing him off the bench to play that left wing position.
On the left wing, I think there's probably maybe an argument you make, as in at left back.
Yeah.
If people are genuinely having that conversation, then people need to screw their heads on it.
No. Nobody is saying that he should start over Antonee Robinson, to clarify, but people are saying he should be in our starting 11. Where does he fit in? And I wouldn't be mad. In fact, I would be pretty delighted to see him in that left wing position, being able to whip in crosses. I just love watching him so much. I don't feel like I've got anything to add that isn't just hella emotional. So I'll stop at that.
I thought he was great. I thought he was really, really good.
Yeah.
And again, I think it was in that Preston game in the Carabao, he got exposed a bit defensively. But again, it was that was first game back for him, really. I think that was, he hadn't really been tested up until that point. Every time he's played since then, I think he's looked a lot more with it defensively and able to hold his own, which is promising to see. The argument I think that is worth making, and Liz, I think you make an entirely valid point. Outside of, I would say, Andreas Pereira, in terms of fit players in this squad, he's probably our best crosser of the ball. Andreas Pereira doesn't get enough credit for how delicious some of his whipped crosses from those half spaces are. But after him, he's got to be Sess. And so when we are in games where we are sending in 45 aimless crosses trying to break down a defence, Sess could be the answer in that left wing slot. He really could, because it just takes a better delivery. And I think he's also very smart at picking up, he always has been, at picking up dangerous areas of the pitch off that left flank. And he's capable of doing it from left back. We saw what he did in his first spell at the club from left wing. He picks up really dangerous areas, and I think he gives us a different dimension, especially as a left-footed player on the left-hand side. How many of our attacks are entirely dependent on Antonee Robinson being able to deliver the ball? Otherwise, it's a winger who has to cut back onto their right foot and slow everything down. So I'd like to see it. But when that happens, I'm not sure. I think Forest could be an interesting one. We know how Forest set up. If we're going to try and get through them and put crosses into the box, it's going to need a good delivery to get the better of Milenkovic and Murillo. Sess could be the answer late on.
If we start slinging crosses into the box against Forest, I might go home. But I
guarantee we will. I guarantee we will.
Yeah, Jack, look forward to your walk home.
Yeah. I'll be gone by 35 minutes if we start slinging them in against Murillo and Milenkovic. That might be me.
Also with the Wilson injury, like obviously terrible news, and it goes without saying, but we've got an opportunity to move Iwobi out of that left-hand spot, put Sess in there, put Iwobi on the right. I think.
The only thing I would say about this from a kind of tactical perspective, and I think is that the reason that Jedi thrives so much down the left-hand side is because the winger takes players away by cutting inside. And so therefore you're occupying that right half space. And I think if you have Jedi and Sess on that wing, you are going to just double occupy it like the same space. Like they both want to be in the exact same position time and time again. And I feel like you would struggle with being able to like occupy the defender by cutting inside if you have two players going on and on.
The only counterpoint I'll make to that is that Sess did that in his first spell. What Slavisa's team really, in terms of what the fullback was doing, wasn't
sure,
too
but you
different.
don't get the crosses. You don't get the crosses then, because Sess is doing a different thing right now to what. And I appreciate that if he's playing in a left wing slot, maybe what he's being asked to do is different. But like Sess was never a crosser of the ball. He just was. He was either ghosting it at the back post or he was a byline and get down, and that's what Jedi does.
Yeah, which is fair. But I think it would be. I would like to see if you keep that width. I think you get the opportunity, and Jedi still does it, but those sort of underlapping runs where if you can get Jedi sort of just drifting in between a right back and a centre back, then suddenly he's crossing the ball from the edge of the 18-yard box rather than the byline. And it's something that we've spoken about quite a lot. Jedi is quite good at those drilled balls across the face when he's got a little bit, if he's not those long, high raking ones that he puts in, which never seem to have a target. But if he's able to drill one across the face, Sess might allow him to create space for those runs instead. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, and it's one of those things. It could happen. It could happen this over the course of this month, and we could look horrifically bad. But I think it could be fun. And is there any Fulham fan at the moment who wouldn't like to see Sess on the pitch in the Premier League at Craven Cottage trying to make a difference? The football's about these lovely things.
No, I agree. I mean, look, we've got a question on Sess, so we'll come back to him later on. But I did want to just ask before we take a break, Jack, the two Brazilians yesterday, I thought really, really did run the show from an attacking perspective for Fulham. And Andreas, I thought was excellent generally, getting about the pitch and making things happen. And obviously 2 goals for Rodrigo. We're 40 minutes into this podcast. We haven't mentioned him yet. And he actually scored the goals that have sent us through to the next round of this competition. 2 really, really good finishes, I thought, in very different ways. And that was as composed and a well put together performance from Rodrigo from the start, I think, that we've seen in a long time.
Well, it's February, so you know what that means. It's time for Rodrigo Muniz to step up and become honestly one of the best players in world football. So it's fantastic to see Muniz score goals. I mean, this is actually, I think, his first goals of the season when he started a game this season. All his goals have come off the bench. And it might put a seed of doubt into Marco Silva's mind when it comes to selecting the team on Saturday. Do we go with, Jimenez and then bring on Rodrigo, or do we start with Rodrigo because he scored 2 goals and has really made a name for himself? He just got given the Man of the Match award for the game against Wigan. So I was very, very impressed with his overall game. Muniz is a player who people are still unsure whether he's going to be, a man to score 20 goals a season, 25 goals a season, the sort of striker you need, the sort of profile of striker you need in a Premier League season. And, obviously we've seen that in fits and starts with his Fulham career so far. I think maybe it's so difficult because we've got 2 strikers in Raul and Jimenez. Sorry, Raul and Rodrigo Muniz, who score almost enough goals to keep the fans satisfied. But obviously, there's always been that cry since we lost Mitrovic for that sort of replacement, the man to score 20, 25 goals per season. 25 goals is a lot. 20 goals a season. And look, I think Muniz has
25
all
comps, Jack. We'll give you a bit of a benefit.
25 all comps is fine. Yeah. Muniz has got all the attributes to be a top striker. He just needs to to show it on a consistent basis, and that's not what we've seen since he's been at the club. He's obviously had an incredible purple patch last season, and we might see that again. But for him to stamp his authority again on the team, I think he needs to be starting Premier League games and then scoring in those Premier League games. And obviously that's going to be difficult with Raul Jimenez being a very important player for us as well. So again, like Marcus Silva says almost every time he's asked about it, it's a nice headache to have. It's a nice bit of competition to have up top. But could we see Rodrigo Muniz, repeat what he did this time last season? Maybe. He just needs to start those games though.
Yeah. One of the things that piqued my interest was that second goal. This could be iconic. This is one of those things that will go down.
Rodrigo could be like the R9 haircut.
I'll do it if you do it, JC. I reckon we'd both rock it. But no, what I thought was interesting with the second goal was, when was the last time? And granted, it was against a Wigan backline that didn't look great. When was the last time we scored a goal like that? Like created through the middle, over the top.
Yeah.
Run in behind. We so rarely see that. The only times I can think of Fulham creating chances like that is usually it's that first time ball over the shoulder for Harry Wilson making that diagonal run. But this was our centre forward getting in behind a back line. And it felt weird watching it, because we don't score goals like that. And it would be nice if we could start to add something different like that to our repertoire, getting teams turning and running back towards goal, creating opportunities through the middle as well as out wide. I think we need to diversify how we attack. And so that was a promising thing to see as we hit this next run of fixtures.
Yeah, I mean, it was James Carragher, so pinch of salt, but I still, you take them when you can get them. Before we take a break here, just one word answers from all of you. Blonde Rodrigo, yes or no? Liz?
Yes.
Dan?
Definitely.
Jack?
Yeah, why not?
Fantastic. That's 4 from 4. We take what we get. Right, we're going to take the break. Take a break there. After the break, we're going to answer a couple of your questions. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. Jack Collins here with Jack Kelly, Elizabeth Barnard and Dan Cooke, talking about the Wigan win at the weekend that sees us through to the next round of the FA Cup. And we've got a couple of questions to finish us off. So I'm going to hand the floor to Miss Elizabeth Barnard.
Amazing. Thanks, Jack. I'm going to start by throwing this one to Jack Kelly from Luke Gregory. What would Jedi be worth if he could cross like Sess? And should we genuinely be looking at Ryan as a left-wing option?
Yes, I mean, given the injury situation with the wingers, we heard about Reece Nelson getting a further injury, so our options are limited when it comes to the winger position. What was evident is that Marco isn't ignoring the fact that Sessegnon can play on the left wing, because he brought him on in that position against Newcastle last week. Is definitely an option. Willian's, as he said, a week or two away from full fitness. So, when it comes to options for the game against Nottingham Forest, obviously Iwobi will be first choice, and Adama could play on the right. That would make sense. But we could also, like you said earlier, we could see Sessegnon play on the left and then Iwobi on the right. And look, it's difficult because when we signed Sessegnon and he's predominantly a left back, you're thinking he's not going to get in over Antonee Robinson, who's arguably one of the best left backs in the Premier League. So, I mean, I already put a price tag on Antonee Robinson around about 60 to 70 million pounds, given his traits and what he can offer are so limited in the Premier League. If he put Sess's cross on top of that, I'd go 80 million for sure.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Antonee Sessegnon. Not sure that works. £80 million player.
Here's to you, Tony Sessegnon. Fulham loves you more than you will know.
Excellent, guys. Right. Dan, I'm going to throw this on to you. It's about Sander Berge. Is he the best press-resistant midfielder we've had since Dembele? I've not felt calmness like I feel when Berge is on the ball.
It's a big shout. I don't know if I'm being silly here, but I feel like actually TC might be better as a press resistant midfield. I feel like TC is pretty much unpressable, but Sander Berge is my flavour of the month at the moment. I'm loving the change that he's brought about in 2025 to this Fulham side. His injury and him falling out of the team perfectly coincides with probably some of the worst football we've played this season. So him coming back has made a huge difference. We don't win away at St James's Park without Sander Berge. It probably would have got even more hairy at Wigan if he hadn't come onto the pitch and just calmed things down. He is starting to be everything I hoped he would be in that terms of Silva's bringing a little bit more defensive nous to him, because I think that's the thing he's lacked. Whilst he's got a physical frame, he's not always been the smartest defensively and structurally, but he is also then bringing the unique talent he has in terms of driving forward with all 6 foot whatever of him, not being especially quick, but having such long limbs that you can't shake him off the ball, you can't catch him. And when he makes those driving runs through the middle of the pitch, that really makes a difference to this Fulham side. So is he the best we've had since Dembele? No, but he gives us something so unique that we haven't had in a long time. And that in terms of that strength of running, yeah, maybe Dembele-esque in a slightly different way. But I agree with the person who's asking it that he is incredibly press resistant and we are far better with him than we are without him.
He's got great levers, is the phrase I'd use. Someone actually really starts to move, you're like, oh, excellent. Ollie Norwood was ludicrously press resistant. I remember watching Ollie Norwood and being like, I don't know what you're doing because you're not particularly strong or fast, I don't think. But nobody seemed to be able to get anywhere near him when it came to actually trying to take the ball off him in central midfield. And I always respected that.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's got a Zorb ball around him. Right, but back to business, guys. And then finally, and this is quite a serious one. So it's about Ali Mac. Avas has asked, should we be using the Mackintosh chants as a potential springboard for an organised protest at the Palace home game? Jack, I'll start off with you, JC.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts about this, or feel free to throw it back out?
No, I do have thoughts about it, and it was pretty vitriolic, I thought, yesterday, towards Ali Mackintosh in the away end, and in many ways, I think that's probably a little bit overdue. And I was having conversations with people in the away end and chatting away to people, and they were like, it's been here since 2008, and things have got steadily worse in terms of ticket prices, in terms of actually alienating the fan base. And I was like, yeah, you know what, actually, that's correct. And it's interesting because obviously these debates have come up left, right, and centre in recent weeks. And I was talking about it on the radio the other day, and I remember going to those games in the Europa League, obviously in 2010, and bringing friends along for 10, 15 quid who weren't Fulham fans at the time, but now 2 or 3 of those of the 5 people I've got are season ticket holders, right? Because those tickets were available, and yes, obviously we were in Europe, and so people are like, oh, it's only the really expensive games, it's only the Manchester Uniteds that are really, really expensive. And I'm like, yeah, but we were playing in the Europa League round of 16 and tickets were 15 quid for under 18s. We were okay in terms of bringing people along. And look, maybe that speaks to a different thing about being able to sell the ground and all of that, but ultimately the ground's just been expanded. So if we couldn't fill it at its own old capacity, then I do have really, really big concerns about Fulham being able to grow the fan base to an extent we're going to sell out a new capacity of this, especially if $8,000 of that capacity in terms of attendance are in a stand where tickets are ludicrously expensive. And I think it's, you can make the argument that tickets sell out all the time if you want. If you were at the Manchester United game, then that argument doesn't hold steam. So that's fine. And I would like to make it clear that I think that, having people coming from different areas of the world to come to Fulham games is a major positive. And I think the football and the Premier League in particular has never been a more global game. And that we have so many fans spread out and thrown out across the world, far-flung areas. And those people coming to Fulham is one of the best things ever, because you speak to those people when they come and it means the absolute world to them. So I would just like to make it clear that when we talk about tourists, in inverted commas, in the ground, we are not talking about Fulham fans who've come from abroad to watch Fulham, you know, for the first, second, 10th, whatever time. That is not what we're getting on about here, because I think sometimes these two arguments get conflated. I love meeting people who have come from the far-flung corners of the globe, wherever that might be, to watch Fulham because they care about this club. And I think that matters as much as anyone who's been going since they were a youngster, because that is the lifeblood of the club, the influence it can have across, you know, different areas and different worlds. And that's really, really important to stress, because I never ever want this conversation to feel like it's trying to alienate people who are Fulham fans from around the globe. That is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is people who at the end of the game against Manchester United whipped off the coats and they were all in Manchester United shirts. Or the people who were in the queue behind my cousin the other week who paid $5,000 for a ticket each because they come to watch a Manchester United game in the Hammersmith end, not because, and look, those people were scammed. That is a bad vibe, right? Like, no one should be paying £1,000 for a ticket for a game, full stop, ever, as like a genuine point of principle. But I also like, if you're a Manchester United and you're buying tickets in the home end, then play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I'm afraid, like, you have to be able to understand the situations that you're going into. And I think that we have got to a point where Fulham has become so far removed from what it was in terms of building a fan base. And we talk about the clubs around us. We are in a really, really saturated area. And I don't want to go over the same points of argument again. It's £15 to go to the FA Cup at Brentford. I know they're out of it. It's a separate point, and I really enjoy it. But like, as a point of interest, all of their cup games are £15. Like, brilliant. You know what? If you get a season ticket there for an under 18, it's under £100 to get those people into games left, right, and centre. To get a season ticket in the West Stand is £400 at Brentford. I know it is, because I have people who do it. And you're looking at that and thinking, so how are Fulham growing this fan base? We were having a really interesting conversation on the train home yesterday with a couple of old boy Fulham fans. They were lovely, absolutely unbelievable. And they were talking about the fact that Fulham's fan base, let's say there's 10% of season ticket holders, or maybe less, right, who go away week in, week out. And they were complaining that they said it was embarrassing that we didn't sell out the away end at Wigan yesterday. And I take it from two perspectives, and I don't necessarily think they're right on that. But my argument was, okay, so if 10% of the Fulham fan base at a max want to go to away games, what do? Do you try and convince another 10%? Or do you grow the fan base so that 10% becomes bigger? And you grow the fan base by making it accessible, by making people who from the local area want to come to games, not throwing them tickets when you can't sell it out, not checking tickets in the metro and selling adverts when you can't sell out a home game against Manchester United. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And this all comes back, and to have, round this rant off, this all comes back to Alistair Mackintosh, who is feeding this as a business model. And I appreciate that football is a business. I work in the game, right? Like, my entire life is spent in this game. And I know for a fact that in terms of what you're taking as a revenue model, in terms of fans coming through the doors, is a small part of it. And if you want to tell me that the reason that Fulham aren't signing a £30 million striker in January is because tickets aren't expensive enough, or because the people are complaining about ticket prices, then you're deluding yourself. You are deluding yourself in terms of what this costs. Football should be accessible. It should be locale, in terms of not to exclude further flung regions, but to make sure that people in this region really, really care. And Alistair Mackintosh is currently in this club and making things into a business model that you or I can pretend that we understand. We never will, because we don't answer to him. We don't understand it as a growth thing. But I promise you right now that if they're telling you that your season ticket going up, or your ticket price is going up, is to sign the next striker in the window in the summer, then they are lying to you, and you are lying to yourself if you believe them. And I refuse to accept that this is being given as an argument. I've seen the arguments on these questions on the Facebook pages. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And then, like, ultimately, if we're going to have this debate and we're going to have it on a regular basis, we need to understand the actual facts in terms of what the revenues for the club are, what the streams are, and actually what ticket prices contribute to that stream and look it up and read about it. Look at Kieran Maguire, look at Price of Football, look at all of those things and understand how small the issue of ticket pricing is within the general like infrastructure of the pricing of the club. And that ultimately is where we've got to with this point. And I think yesterday felt like a tipping point in the away end.
Yeah. The only thing that I would add to that as well, JC, because I mean, like, there's very little to add. I think the majority of the fan base would and should agree with all those comments. Even if ticket pricing, by boosting it up, by charging us through the nose, allowed us to buy a £50 million striker. If you gave me the choice between a £50 million striker and being sat with friends and people that I've been going with for years and years and years and see the same faces every week, I would have those people next to me in a heartbeat. Because ultimately, would I rather Fulham finish 6th in a ground that has lost all soul and all feeling and going is no longer fun, and finishing 15th but having a great time chatting to people every time I go? I would take 15th every single time, because that's what Fulham is to me.
I agree with you, Dan, but I also actually don't think it's that clear cut. Marco has spoken so much about how the atmosphere at Fulham, which isn't the most aggressive, isn't the most lively, and especially this season, has been really poor. And when I go, I sit near the back of the Hammersmith end usually, and it still feels poor. He's spoken about how the atmosphere impacts the team and how a good atmosphere can propel the team towards success. And by allowing actual Fulham fans to come week in, week out and create that atmosphere, create that community, that will propel the team to further success. And that will mean that we will get revenue through European competitions, going further in cups, all that kind of thing that dwarfs the revenue we get by charging slightly more on ticket prices. It's just, for me, it's such a bad business model. And like, obviously I'm emotional about it as a Fulham fan, like born a Fulham fan. But the chant yesterday was, I don't care about Ali. He don't care about me. All I care about is Fulham FC. And that's what I feel. Like, he just doesn't care about me, the fan. Yeah. He doesn't care about any of us, the fans. And all I care about is seeing this team do well, having a community of supporters that follow this team that I love. That's all I care about. And having a CEO that so blatantly does not care, it has to stop.
I completely agree. If you're going to bat on social media, if you are shilling for Alistair Mackintosh, remember that he does not give a monkey's about you. He cares about your ticket price. He cares about the money that you put into the club. He does not care about you as a fan. And now I'll tell you what, if the merger that happened in the late 80s between Fulham and Queen's Park Rangers happened tomorrow, there are loads of people who would look there and think, yeah, well, maybe it's good for the business. Nonsense. Like nonsense. It would go through tomorrow because there are not enough people willing to stand up and say, not on my name. And I'm afraid that we have these arguments with people left, right, and center, whether it be on social media, whether it be in person, whatever. Like these people who are willing to, accept it all to be like, yeah, well, we might sign Jonathan David in this. He's going to Barcelona, mate. Grow up. Like without being funny, this is not the argument you need to have. The point is that this board and this CEO does not care about you as a fan. You are minor. You are insignificant to this club unless you stand up and be heard. And I'm afraid we've got to the point where it now feels like a tipping point.
Yeah. And I think this is the tipping point yesterday. It was this sort of perfect storm, wasn't it? Where we were in a game that, yes, mattered, but wasn't, a Premier League game where we were fighting and battling and it was do or die. We felt pretty comfortable in this game, and that was the atmosphere from the very beginning. But it was also over 2,000 Fulham fans who were Fulham fans and have always been. That end was magnificent yesterday. So many people you bump into that you see all the time. It was, to carry out the phrase, it was proper Fulham in that way. And it was a great day. And that's why it felt like the perfect storm, because it was 2,000 people who all feel the same. They all feel that they are no longer valued as people, as fans, and they want to make their voices heard about it. And I think, one, it's impossible to ignore because that away end was singing songs about it for 50% of that game.
It was on the radio.
Picked up on the radio. It got picked up on the telly. It got picked up everywhere. It's on social media. This will not be swept away. And I think what is the question that is asked by Avas is spot on. Is this the springboard? I think it has to be. This is that moment where we've finally got that collective feeling in the fan base of like, no longer, this is enough. We're not putting up with this anymore. And now it's about next steps. Now we go and like, right, we're staying strong on this. We're standing our ground. We are the fans of this football club, and we will be here way longer than he will. And it's about time he left.
Agreed. Not in my name. It is probably the line that I would finish this. Right, let's take things to a lighter touch just to finish this podcast off. And I'm going to ask you all a very, very simple question. And the question basically is, who would you like to draw in the 5th round? And I'm going to throw this first to Mr. Jack Kelly.
I would like... That's a great question. I'd like Millwall away.
That's a cracking answer, Jack. That's a great answer. I would love to be back there on a Tuesday night, ideally.
Yeah, it always has to be in the dark. Always I don't think we've ever played Millwall in sunlight.
We can't go to the Den in the daytime. It's actually illegal. It's banned. Dan?
I said it yesterday on the quick take, and I'm going to stand by it just because I think it would be fun. I think it would be difficult. Burnley, bring me Scott Parker's negative Nelly Burnley team, and let's spend 90 minutes singing. I think it would be a fun one. And you know what? Sod it. Burnley away. Let's get.
I was going to say home or away. Here, let's go back to the cricket club, shall we?
Sod it. And you know what? Let's go up there and let's sing about him. And I reckon some Burnley fans would agree, because whilst they're flying, he is not popular.
I love that.
The Burnley thing's so interesting. To be honest, I'm kind of with Dan. I would love to take on Scott Parker again, stare in the whites of his eyes and, do his negative team. But actually, I would love Cardiff away. I just feel like there's some old beef between Fulham and Cardiff, and I'd like to reignite it just for a day. That would be super fun.
Only if we can replicate that 12, what was it? What's like 12:30, 12:15 kickoff when we played them in the FA Cup years ago, and there was about 8 people there.
Bring back Steffi Johansson for one game.
Yeah.
Bring back the Don. He's like, drag him out of retirement for one game. I would like Blackburn Rovers.
What about you, Jack?
Blackburn Rovers or Wolverhampton Wanderers away. They haven't played yet, but either of those away. Take me to Ewood Park, ideally. Ideally, I'd love to go to Blackburn, but I would also take Molineux.
I was there for the 7-0, and I would love to go back.
It has to be on a Tuesday night. Both of those, they have to be on a Tuesday. And I can't be dealing with this at 3:00 on a Saturday. Like, it needs to be under the lights. Either Ewood Park and Molineux, and that was my answer.
Well, we're going to Molineux in like 2 weeks. Why would you want to go again for the FA Cup?
Well, like, ideally, basically, Jack, I'm like, ideally, what I'm saying here is that I want Blackburn, but like, if I get Wolves as a byproduct of that because they haven't played yet, then I will accept it.
I see.
The most funny option would obviously be Preston away.
That is true.
I feel like Sammy
James on the moon. He got Preston away.
Yeah, Sammy James would be not a happy man, and that's putting it lightly.
He'd be cooked, I'm afraid. I think as Jack says, his head would be on the move. And I would love to see. I would like to say that I might go and see the draw with Sammy just on the off chance that we get Preston away, just to see what happens. So we'll see how we go. Right, I think on that note, it's probably time for us to call this a day. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Jack Kelly.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Appreciate you, Jack. Thank you very much to Mr. Dan Cooke.
Thank you, JC. Loved it.
And thank you very, very much to Miss Elizabeth Barnard, who is going to name this podcast.
Thank you, Jack. And yes, I am. Lots of great options. Love them all as always. But I'm going to go for Chris's Muniz's Wigwam.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm delighted. Absolutely wonderful. Shouts out to Chris. That's a great podcast name. Right. Sammy and Mr. Cooke are going to be back on this week's Thursday Club, taking in for me, Dan, on debut. So that's exciting. I'm glad to be handing over to such distinguished hands. Make sure you tune in for that later in the week, where they're going to be previewing the Forest game. But for now, thank you so much for listening. We are through to the next round of the FA Cup. Let's see what the draw throws up for Fulham. But thank you so much for tuning in. You Whites.